All right, so for this panel, we'll be talking with our three associate engine programmers on their lessons in joining the Insomniac engine team. Starting from my left is Evan Hatch, who is working on the core support team. Vitor Menezes, Menezes, sorry,
No one has ever gotten that right. It's okay.
who is working on the core animation team, and Dale Kim, who is working on the core syndicate team. So I want to start with asking what was the most surprising thing in joining the team. Evan, you want to jump in?
Sure. I think for me, the most surprising thing about joining the team was, or just core team in general, was that our job is not. Was learning that our job was not just to be a programmer. I expected to come in, got hired on, expected to come in and, okay, I'm a programmer, so I'm going to sit at my desk and I'm going to do my programming job and I'm going to get these things to do and I'm going to do them and everything's going to be great. The reality is that's not the reality. The reality is the job is to do whatever is necessary to solve problems, and that means spending 2 weeks not writing a single line of code. That's what it is. So I think in terms of what was surprising for me is you come in expecting just to be I'm a programmer, but that's not at all. That's far from it. I mean, it can be that, but a lot of times it's not.
Yeah, I mean, I'd echo most of that, except that I think for me, one of the most surprising things was just the degree of integration with people who are not technical. I guess thinking of the size of Insomniac, even though it's not really a large company, it was large enough that I felt that we'd probably be, siloed off into our disciplines. There'd probably be some kind of management mediation or something. But the degree with which it is totally expected that we'll go and you're doing something for this animation team. It's great, go to their desk and talk to them about it, and try to wrangle. How can you translate what they're saying into the technical problem that you can solve, even if it's a technical problem, because sometimes you find out that it's not really a technical problem.
For me, I was really surprised by how much focus there was right from the beginning about people, because I had come from an expectation that you're going to be programming, so you're going to be staring at your monitor, writing code all day, but you're working with other people to build this game. You can't ignore those people. You have to work with them and actually solve the problems that they have, not just write a bunch of code that, in theory, someone will use. You might be writing code that no one wants or solves no problem. So that was a big thing. It was a pleasant surprise.
So if I could summarize your answers, it's surprising that we had to solve problems and communicate.
There's that sort of stereotype where programmers and I had the sense before I even got here of just game engine programmers, they're these wizards that do magical things and they just come out with solutions out of their hats.
Yes,
That's
they are.
that's the illusion that I
Which
had.
I would like to maintain. So,
but it's more about actually trying to figure out what needs to be solved, solving that problem.
all right. What in coming into the team and learning about more about what we do in particular and what our systems are, and sort of diving in, what turned out to be complicated that you really just expected to be easy?
I mean, for me personally, especially since I've not been here very long, it's trying to make sense of everything. There is actually kind of a lot to take in. And I came from a place where I sort of knew everything left and right in the code base in terms of what everyone was doing. We have 200 plus people here. I have no idea sometimes what, someone who's 30 feet over are doing, because they're working on something of their own tasks and everyone's got their own things that they're working on. And so trying to keep in the loop is pretty difficult.
Yeah, I think I'd say just how difficult it actually is to do multi-project development. Because I thought that, between version control and all these things, it'll mostly work itself out. But as Dave talked, with all the needs for the amount of testing that it takes, and how all these like different pieces of, the programming team on that project has actually changed this bit of the engine to do this other thing, and now it breaks, and we need to go figure it out. It's just all those little intricacies were definitely more complicated than I expected them to be.
For me, I'd say it's time management. Actually, I mean coming in with the expectation of just being the programmer who sits at his desk and does programming all day. That's in the context of time management. You get your tasks and you just do them. But in the context of having to speak with people and solve actual problems, there's a lot of different things that need to get done. As people have said before, there's way more work to do than we have time to do. So it's managing your time well, and picking your battles, and that's always an ongoing challenge, constant challenge.
So I've railed on quite a lot about this, what I feel is the state of sort of computer science education and game development education over time. But I really want to hear what you guys have to say about it. I mean, where do you think it's working, and where do you think it falls down?
Well, I did a program where in your final year you actually worked on a team of people to design like a small game of some kind. So that was and that was a full year-long project. That worked really well because that you actually did have to work. But the other people you're working with are just other programmers. So that's not the same thing as having to work with people like artists or whatnot, and who have different different needs from people in production. So but that being said, that was a really good process to go through that kind of thing. The things that might not be working so well, I mean, it's still good to have your traditional class instruction, but those don't, other than just teaching you new ways to code or new rendering techniques or whatever it is, that does not at all address how you actually have to address the needs of customers that are going to use the things that you make. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say overall, I think my education prepared me well for the technical aspect of things. Definitely, if I really think about it, I think only a minority of my classes are really things that I use every day in this field. Like I took a programming for performance class, which was very much like we're going to optimize matrix multiply down to a register allocation ourselves and all this kind of thing. That's actually been the kind of mental model that's helped the most, as well as some classes in parallel programming and the like. But if I think of the the Java-based classes, or the ones that were just do a thing in the web with Python or whatever, those taught me infrastructural kinds of things, like working with other people and version control and those kinds of things. But the actual technique there didn't really translate very well at all.
For me, I went to a very traditional CS school, and a lot of what you do there is to train yourself to solve homework problems. There's a limited set of that problem space. You're given some time, you do that, and you're done once you finish it. The problems that you solve, in the real world, are not like that at all.
So you're saying there's not just a simple answer?
Right.
Right.
And you're often making you're often making difficult choices on how to trade off. You often are not even sure what those trade-offs need to be, because you might not have even identified the problem correctly. And that is a skill that you don't really get to exercise or try to build while you're at least an undergrad at a traditional university. You're sort of just down this path of doing homework. That's it.
So in terms of sort of training, on-the-job training, right, and sort of joining the team, what is it that you can now look to in your time and say, this was something that we did that may be unique to our team to help you get on board, that you thought was useful, or something that wasn't?
Are you talking about specifically onboarding process?
Yeah, or just the sort of the time frame, the first year, the first couple of years, right? Just that, what is it that you see that we do to sort of help you get on board and help you understand how we're going to approach solving problems?
Well, I think that we deploy us all to like go talk to all the other people on the team and figure out what they do to give you a general view is also very useful coming out of kind of green to get a realistic look at what are the pieces of a game engine for real, because even when you're dealing with Unreal or whatever, it's pretty hard to pick that apart yourself, or it takes a very long time. So that, I think, definitely helps you to sort of see the bigger picture plus all the little pieces, kind of. I think that's probably one of the better things we do.
I mean, yeah, basically, just like watching people who have been doing this for a while is really helpful. Like within the last few weeks, even just Andreas is my lead, and I've watched like the way he sort of looks at problems, and I'm like, wow, he actually like thinks about things very carefully, whereas I tend not to do that. And it's really kind of astonishing. Like when you have more experience, like you're able to sort of really nail down and drill down to an issue much faster. And I am not able to do that, but watching other people do that, it's interesting because they figured out what works for them, what are the important things that they need to worry about, and just being observant is helpful. Watching other people who have done it before.
Evan?
I mean, largely agree with what Vitor and Dale said. In terms of what to when I came on, what helped me kind of get an idea of what to expect. Just I remember on the day one, I showed up and I sat down with Johnny, who brought a giant list of bugs with him. And he sat down with me, and I hadn't even set up my machine. I hadn't done anything yet. He was like, okay, let's start going through these. I'm like, what? I am not ready for this at all. But, it was that expectation of like, okay, you're here, let's go. And I think that was really good, actually. It wasn't just, okay, take your time, feel it out, whatever. Get back to us when you're ready. It was, no, you're here. We hired you for a reason. Now let's get to work. And it was very interesting experience.
All right. Is there anything that you wish you had known before you had joined the team?
Just working with larger teams in general. I guess some of the more experienced people in AAA might say that Insomniac is not a very large company, but for me, it's the largest company that I've had to work for like sort of an intimate, like everyday working with people sort of way. I've had internships at very large companies, but that the actual people you work with every day was not that large. Here, it's like you might have to jump over to the other side of the floor and talk with animators or artists or whatever. And I did not have that experience before. And just people management, trying to figure out what people's problems are with what they want out of, their tools, identifying stuff correctly, and actually just being able to work and talk with people.
Yeah, I guess I wish I'd known the degree to which we have kind of independence in a sense. 'Cause it's kind of on all of us to figure out what, like, you want to do this, okay, is it worth it, essentially? What are the trade-offs, the opportunity costs? Because that is, a skill that kind of isn't really taught anywhere. It's something you have to pick up on your own. And it's just difficult to do. So I kind of wish I'd had, done something more oriented towards that in the past to prepare me for the kind of things I have to do now.
Yeah, basically what you said, Vitor. The just knowing that the independence we have, that we're largely we're on a team, we're on a specific team within core, and our focus is going to be in that realm, but largely we are in charge of what we do and what we ultimately work on. And so there's a lot of, when you come in expecting to just kind of be told what to do as a new person, but to some degree, yes, that happens, but to a larger degree, that does not happen. And it's on you, it's on all of us to spot the things that need to be improved upon. So, not, kind of wish that you had known that coming in, that would have been an expectation. Not that it start out negatively or anything, but might have helped get off the ground a little faster.
Right. Well, I actually want to add, like, the whole time management thing is actually really important, because especially if you're like a student or a fresh grad, that's actually something that I think you have very little ability to do, because in school things have been doled out in chunks that they know is doable in a certain amount of time. Out here it's like, okay, you got a problem. You have many other problems, but only so much time. What are you going to do to make sure you can solve the problems that you want to solve or need to solve? And that's really difficult to get a handle on, just to make sure that you're not just doing some weird academic thing that will end up not, providing that much value.
All right. Well, I want to get to back to the concrete, which I think is, as we talked about, is the thing that people find most valuable. So I want to use your unique perspective here. You have a unique perspective in sort of looking at the engine and the tools, and I want to know, what is it that struck you? What is it that, when you're sort of looking at the data, or looking at the tools, or looking at the engine, that struck you as being interesting or different? What are the specific things?
Just the fact that our engine and tools are capable of doing so much stuff.
They're just so awesome.
I mean, it's really quite amazing what they're capable of. And I thought, seeing what our people in production, what they can do, what they can accomplish, it was just pretty. Yeah, it was quite striking. With all the problems that it does have here and there. But
Well, in terms of the problem space then, right? In terms of the problems, I mean, it's a real world, real production bit of code and data, right? So it has its own rough edges. Were there any of those problems that surprised you? Like, you didn't think that we would have this kind of problem, but we really do.
I think a lack of automation when we first got. When I first got here, there was a real lack of just basic, like unit testing, something that really didn't exist. Which we've been working on it; it's been getting better, but it showed up and there was almost none of it, and it was a little surprising to see that in game and tools across everything. There was just nothing. All relied on process of QA and whatnot to find everything. So I think that was surprising for me.
All right, Vitor, anything that struck you? Doesn't have to be bad.
So to echo something that Evan said earlier, I think I was just struck by the actual size of the data set that we deal with, not only offline, because that's also impressive. Like Sunset Overdrive was like, it's half a terabyte. And I was like, it fits on 50 gigs and works on 8 at runtime. Like, what happened here? So that struck me as well. But also even in the scope of those 8 gigabytes that we have at RAM, because I'm like, well, my web browser, it needs 4 gigabytes. I don't know what the hell it's doing with it. But, it doesn't have nearly as many things as a game does, so obviously a game should take less, right? But no, it turns out that, like, even at runtime, the amount of, like, objects and models and sound instances and animations and everything that's going on is much, much larger than I thought it would
you've
be.
done a lot of work in the sound space in particular.
Yeah.
So can you throw any numbers out for us, like a specific number of sound instances at runtime?
Well, I mean, I think the limit in Wise is maybe a couple hundred voices, which amounts to, like, things decoding and playing back. But it has its own little management structure on top of it. So there's more that we have to keep track of to make sure it, like, doesn't go away wrong. So we have to support something like thousands of basically, like, tracking information for all of the possible things that could be playing sound from various different places, and just, like, the amount of intermediary things. So it's not just the sound data, right? There's also, like, a bunch of, like, associated metadata to control it, because sound designers will do things like, we just play an event and then they respond to it with, a footstep. It can be any one of these 4, so they set that up, and that's actually even more data that's out there. So when you, like, collate just the amount of variations of things that can exist, it's also far, far more massive than I imagined it would be. And we've had places where it was like, when things aren't totally managed correctly in the middle of development, it'll be like, oh yeah, there's just 1,000 umbrellas somewhere that decided to play their little flappy sound at load time. And they shouldn't, it's a bug, but it's even like, somewhere we have to track that, like, those things might be doing that, and they need to be able to do that when they need to do it, but just not right now.
So in terms of the scope, right? Maybe
Yeah.
are there some specific cases in, say, looking at, say, Sunset, where, uh, the scope was particularly interesting or necessary or all surprising?
Sound-wise, you mean,
Yeah.
specifically?
Yeah,
Well, I think one thing that we still have to this day that we're looking to solve was what we call the reverb or environment system, and just the way they use that. Because initially, for one thing, there's just like hundreds and hundreds of volumes essentially loaded, and we need to track essentially which ones you're in and how you go in and out of them, because they don't function. Like, thinking about it, you'd think, oh, isn't this a stack or something? But because of the way you can overlap them in containing ways, you can end up with like, basically it's not really a stack, it's just this like constantly managed list of things. And so that was, yeah, like there were way more of those than there need to be, because they also use them to trigger sound essentially, because they have that functionality.
So in terms of actual counts, like how many are we talking about
Oh.
in terms of, say, a zone or a level or?
I think we've hit the limit of like 1,000 of those loaded at once and had to bump it, and I don't know if we bumped that to 2 or 4K, and we've just left it there for a while now. There's, yeah, something like that we have to support. And it has to do with the various different usage scenarios. Like, in the streaming open world, it usually doesn't actually get that high, but sometimes where they're in the middle of development and they're testing, there was just like one level that was just a big like mini city that they had done that just had everything loaded all the time, and they basically ran into a ton of budget limits with that, including memory generally. So we have to support those kinds of use cases as well as just the normal in-game thing.
Okay. Dale?
Not talking about audio, right? We're talking about
No,
that
anything-
struck
yeah.
me. It's just the size of the engine team compared to my perceived like size of the game. It was like the engine team's not all that huge, and yet we're doing a lot in our games. And there are other companies that have much larger teams, and we need to compete with them. So it means that we have to be very, very careful with what we choose to do or not do. And the scope of that was not obvious to me until I got here.
I think as Ted mentioned at the beginning, right? We run as lean as we can, but I think that it's also clear that we're a development team, right? We lean very hard on development as opposed to, say, research. We do what research we can, but development is clearly our mandate, right? We are making games, and we are supporting making games. And so we wear as many hats as we need to wear in order to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of you guys sort of jumping around to do different things, maybe what's the breadth, right? What was the surprising breadth of things that you ended up working on or have started working on that maybe surprised you?
I mean, within the first 5 or so weeks I've been here, I've had to touch, a few, like 1 or 2 things in render, something in cinematics and animations. Like, I've seen a lot of different systems, and like, I never get the feeling that, this is this person's code and only that person can touch it. It's like, there's a problem there, you found it. Okay, are you going to fix it? Can you fix it? Are you or do I actually need to handle it because I know that system better? And it doesn't ever feel like you can't touch this because this is my code. People are just here to try to solve the issues at hand rather than try to make it about their code or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of breadth, not only do I from time to time have to help out with anim and cinematics stuff, which I have done, physics as well, because that's just what I'm on Johnny's team, and that's the kind of stuff we look at. But specifically, since my focus is essentially sound, the breadth there is that it's not just runtime, and that came from the fact that we're an integrated runtime/tools team. So the actual breadth of stuff that happens to take from when a sound designer does something in Wise to a thing that live reloads in the game is surprising. Like, if you think about it in terms of little tiny component fields of like you're dealing with I/O, you're dealing with transformation of blind data into another format and then loading in all these things. All these things I have to keep in my head when thinking about, like, that is the actual problem space that I deal with.
Yeah, I just remember, like, as Dale just experienced. I remember starting out, and jumping from team to team to team, and just working on whatever it was that team had going on at the time. And so that was, it was some rendering stuff, and then it was some problem with like the asset archiver on another team, and then it was, whatever it was just a very wide range of various things that we have going on. In terms of, my current spot on the support team is, it's, the mostly, tools related, tools related bugs, helping out in that space wherever possible. So yeah.
All right, Jonathan.
How did you come to join Insomniac? Were there any projects or experience you feel that got you in?
How did you come to join the team, and was there anything, projects or experience that you thought got you in?
I guess I could just. I worked on a small independent game since I graduated from college, and that was difficult because it was a long process. But it was like I learned a lot about how games are made, and sort of unlearned a lot of the things that I thought were good programming when I was in school, which is definitely something that needed to be unlearned. And I think a lot of the skills that I ended up learning while trying to make that game were things that were expected, as fundamental skills to have to be able to join the core team here. So that was very, very helpful.
Yeah, I think for me it was, I'm guessing, I guess, because I don't really know concrete details. But I think the fact that I had spent a lot of time, both during college and before college, thinking about things on a not exactly machine level, definitely more low-level oriented level than many of my peers would, helped, as well as having a little bit of experience towards the end of college on like a multidisciplinary team making a small game. Like there were things like trying to get an English major to use Git, which is less challenging than you might think actually for this particular one, but it was still like it's not obvious. You don't count a lot, but like things that seemed very trivial to me were like, that doesn't work. So just getting that interaction with creative people who aren't necessarily going to be like, yep, it's a command line. I can do all the things I want. This is great. And you'll find that just genuinely, deeply, deeply frightening instead.
I think it's, I think having some kind of, a number of personal projects or some kind of something you can show that goes above and beyond just schooling and classes, that shows that you are actually passionate about this field, that you actually have an interest in something. I don't think it doesn't really, unfortunately, it doesn't really cut it anymore to just say, I went to school, I got my degree, and I took some classes, and all right, give me my job. Like it doesn't. Everyone's doing that, so you really need that something extra to show that you're serious about this. I had a number of side projects that I was working on that I was able to talk about in the interview and whatnot, and I assume that was part of the decision. So again, don't have the details, but yeah, something I think is very important to just have something that really showcases you as like I'm passionate really about this. So something that helps you stand out.
So regarding asking if a problem is worth solving or not, how has working at Insomniac changed what problems you view as tractable or worth solving?
How has working at Insomniac changed what problems you view as tractable or worth solving?
Time constraints. It's like just the fact that there's you only have a set amount of time, and there's so many things to do. Like before, just doing your own projects at home or whatever. Everything is you just decide, oh yeah, that sounds cool, I'll do that, and whatever it takes me, I don't care how long it takes, I'm going to do it. that's not the case. You need to actually weigh that what time, what's the time commitment to this thing, how many people does it affect, and is it actually really critical for them to use this? They might be requesting something to do, like production might request a feature, and okay, that sounds cool. That's going to take me a long time to do. Only one person or two people are going to use it. Maybe not. Maybe not going to happen. Even though it sounds like a really cool thing to do, you just kind of have to take in the whole picture.
All right. Vitor.
Yeah, I mean, I'd echo something like that, where it's been a little bit. There are things that I definitely would believe, I have said before, like, this is totally worth doing and we should do it. But when you actually bring it to, like, what is its impact on the final product really? How many people in production does it really impact? That sort of changed that. And on the other hand, there have been things where I would say, like, that's not really worth spending time on. For example, coming up with maybe a lesser than complete solution, as it were. But sometimes that is totally worth spending time on, because you get, like, you make 80% of the progress you need with half the effort or something like that.
All right. Dale.
I mean, I think it depends on the context of what you're dealing with. The last thing I was on was a very small team, and I kind of felt like I could just be vigilante programmer and do what I thought was cool. But doing that here is not so helpful. Like, you can't just assume that everyone's going to come along with you. You have to work with the actual development problems that people have and try to help them, not just go do your own thing that you think is the best for yourself or is most interesting to you.
All right. Thanks for your time, guys.